This is the 23 News Update at 10.
A luxury from the 70s loses its luster. Tenants come together to have a meeting with Rockford officials after years of disrepair to a once prestigious apartment complex. 23 News reporter Jake Pearson travels to the east side of Rockford, where residents at the Versailles apartments voiced their concerns about their decaying complex and what they call a lack of landlord accountability.
I met with Rockford City Council member Mark Bonney, who told me about the results of a staff inspection on the Versailles complex, which he says broke multiple building codes and fire violations that could potentially put the lives of residents in danger. Bonney tells us the Versailles apartment complex violated 18 different sections of the Rockford City codes, including exposed electrical wires, broken windows, and a public pool that hasn't been treated in years. As a result, tenants at the complex organized a meeting at the District 3 Police Headquarters to express demands to the property's landlords.
We were out without an elevator for over 6 months. They have leaks in their building, they have black mold, and a lot of residents are afraid that if they say something that they won't get their lease renewed.
In response, management has already started taking some action. Staff has worked out a timetable for addressing all of these violations that has them under deadline as to correct some of them as soon as Monday.
At a previous city council meeting, Bonney sought an amendment to a property tax rebate to prevent a decline in property standards. Now, the amendment failed, but Bonney did present pictures of the Versailles complex during his argument.
Thank you, Jake. And the Versailles apartment complex is managed by Sierra Realty and Management, who also owns a second Versailles apartment complex in Naperville, which one Rockford tenant says is much better maintained than the Forest Cities complex.